They called me a charity case, a lonely wallflower who'd been stood up in the most expensive restaurant in the city. Their laughter was like the clinking of cheap glass, sharp and brittle. They had no idea that the man I was waiting for owned the very restaurant they were sneering in, and that the little girl who was about to walk through the door would shatter their perfect, condescending world. Have you ever been judged by your cover? If you have, then you know the sting of being dismissed before you've even said a word. My story is for you. It all started on a Tuesday night. My best friend, Sarah, had been pestering me for months to go on a blind date she'd arranged. "He's perfect for you, Clara," she'd insisted. "He's kind, he's a single dad, and he's got a heart of gold." I was hesitant. My life was quiet, and I liked it that way. I'm a children's book author and illustrator, working from a cozy little studio in my home. My characters, Barnaby the bear and Pip the squirrel, were my constant companions. I didn't need much else. I preferred comfortable sweaters and practical shoes to designer labels and stilettos. So, sitting there in L'Etoile, a place where the chandeliers dripped with crystals and the water glasses were probably worth more than my entire wardrobe, I felt like a sparrow in a peacock enclosure. I'd chosen a simple navy blue dress, one I felt comfortable in, but under the golden glow of the restaurant, it felt plain and inadequate. I checked my watch for the 10th time. 8:15. He was 15 minutes late. A knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. The table next to me was occupied by a trio of women who looked like they'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. They were all sharp angles, expensive jewelry, and voices that carried. From the moment I sat down, I felt their eyes on me. Their whispers were just loud enough to be heard, a calculated cruelty. "Look at her!" The one with the severe blonde bob, who I would later learn was named Veronica, murmured to her friends. "She's been sitting there alone for ages." "How tragic," another one, with lips plump to an unnatural degree, chimed in. "And that dress. Did she get lost on her way to a library fundraiser?" They tittered, a sound that grated on my nerves. I tried to ignore them, focusing on the intricate pattern of the silverware, tracing the filigree with my eyes. I told myself it didn't matter. They didn't know me. But their words were like tiny barbs, hooking into my insecurities. 8:30. Still no sign of my date, Alex. The waiter, a kind-faced young man, came over. "Can I get you something else while you wait, ma'am? Another sparkling water?" I gave him a weak smile. "I'm fine, thank you. I'm sure he'll be here any moment." Veronica and her friends overheard. "He's not coming, dear," she said, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. She leaned over conspiratorially. "Men who make a woman wait this long in a place like this. It's a power move. Or, more likely, he saw you walk in and turned right back around." Her friends laughed again, a little louder this time. My face burned with humiliation. I wanted the marble floor to swallow me whole. Every instinct screamed at me to get up and leave. Why was I subjecting myself to this? I could be at home, sketching Barnaby the bear's next adventure, safe and content. But a part of me, the part that had let Sarah convince me to try, wanted to see it through. What if he was just stuck in traffic? What if there was a good reason? I clutched my simple cloth purse in my lap, my knuckles white. The women continued their assault, their conversation now a performance for my benefit. They spoke loudly about their husbands' recent acquisitions, a yacht, a penthouse, a controlling stake in some tech company. They talked about their upcoming trips to Monaco and the Maldives. It was all designed to highlight the chasm between their world and what they assumed was mine. "Some people just don't belong in certain places," the third woman, a redhead with a disdainful pout, said, flicking a glance at my simple dress. "It's about maintaining standards, you know? It lowers the tone for everyone." "Exactly," Veronica agreed, taking a delicate sip of her champagne. "This used to be such an exclusive establishment. It seems standards are slipping everywhere." I felt small, insignificant, and utterly foolish. They had painted a picture of me without knowing a single true thing. They saw a plain, lonely woman in a cheap dress, being stood up. They didn't see the woman whose books were in hundreds of thousands of homes, whose characters taught children about kindness and courage. They didn't see the woman who had built her own success from a simple love of storytelling and art. They saw only the surface, and they judged it harshly. My resolve began to crumble. It was 8:45. He was 45 minutes late. This was no longer just tardiness. It was a clear message. I had been stood up. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest. The women's voices seemed to grow louder, their laughter more pointed. They had their villain for the evening, their source of entertainment, and they were relishing it. I finally met Veronica's gaze across the small space between our tables. She gave me a smirk, a cold, triumphant little smile that said, "I was right about you." That was it. That was the final straw. I couldn't take another second of it. My hand reached for my purse, my body tensing to stand up and flee. I would pay for my water and walk out with as much dignity as I could muster, even though I felt I had none left. I would go home, put on my favorite pajamas, and forget this night ever happened. Just as I was about to push my chair back, a tiny voice cut through the restaurant's ambient chatter. "Excuse me?" I looked toward the entrance. Standing there, looking a little lost, was a little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old. She had big, curious brown eyes and 2 dark braids that fell over the shoulders of her pretty pink coat. She was holding a well-loved teddy bear, and she was looking right at me. The maitre d' started to move toward her, but she was already walking purposefully between the tables, her gaze fixed on mine. She stopped right beside my chair. The whole restaurant seemed to pause, the clinking of cutlery and the low hum of conversation fading into a curious silence. Even Veronica and her friends stopped talking, their heads turned to watch this unexpected little scene unfold. The little girl looked up at me, her expression serious and earnest. "Are you Clara?" she asked, her voice clear as a bell. I was so surprised, I could only nod. "Yes, I am." A bright smile lit up her face. She held out the teddy bear. "This is Barnaby," she said proudly. "He's my favorite." My heart did a little flip. It was a Barnaby the bear, the very character I had created. He was a little worn from love, just the way I always hoped my character's toys would be. "My daddy's sorry he's late," the little girl said, finally delivering the line that would change everything. "His meeting went super long, and then the traffic was a monster. He said to tell you he's parking the car and to ask if you would please wait for him." I stared at her, speechless. The air shifted. The narrative that had been so cruelly crafted by the women at the next table began to unravel. Veronica let out an audible scoff. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she muttered to her friends. "Now he's sending in a child to do his dirty work. How pathetic," but I wasn't listening to her anymore. I was looking at this little girl, this sweet child holding my creation, and a warmth spread through my chest, chasing away the chill of humiliation. "And who are you?" I asked her gently. "I'm Lily," she said. "And my daddy is Alex." Before I could respond, a man appeared at the entrance, looking around anxiously. He was handsome, with kind eyes crinkled at the corners and a slightly disheveled look that spoke of a frantic rush. His eyes found our table, and relief washed over his face. He hurried over. "Lily, honey, you were supposed to wait for me," he said, his voice a warm baritone. He then turned his full attention to me. "Clara? I am so sorry. I'm Alex." My investor's call ran an hour over, and then a fender bender shut down the entire street. I tried to call the restaurant, but my phone died. "I am so incredibly, deeply sorry for keeping you waiting." He was genuine. The apology was written all over his face. "It's all right," I said, my voice a little shaky. "Lily explained, she's my little advance team," he said, ruffling his daughter's hair. "And my biggest fan, apparently." He gestured to the Barnaby the bear still clutched in Lily's hand. "She doesn't go anywhere without him." It was then that Veronica, unable to stand being ignored, decided to interject. "Well, isn't this cozy?" she said loudly, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Sending your child into a bar to make your excuses." Classy. Alex turned to her, his pleasant expression hardening slightly. He looked at her, then at her friends, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. I apologize if my daughter's presence disturbed your dinner, ladies. It's not her presence that's disturbing. Veronica shot back, emboldened by her champagne. It's the lack of decorum. First, you leave this poor woman sitting here for an hour, a spectacle for the whole restaurant. Then you send a child to apologize. This is L'Etoile, not a playground. Alex's eyebrows rose. A slow, dangerous calm settled over him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. You're right, he said smoothly. This is L'Etoile. And I expect a certain level of decorum from my patrons. Kindness, for example. Discretion. Qualities you three seem to be sorely lacking this evening. Veronica's face paled slightly. Your patrons? Who do you think you are? Alex smiled, but it was a smile with steel behind it. He gestured around the opulent room. I'm Alex Sterling. I own this restaurant. And this one. And the one in London, and the one in Paris. A collective, silent gasp seemed to pass through the nearby tables who had been watching the drama. Veronica's jaw literally dropped. Her perfectly painted red lips formed a small, shocked O. Her friends looked at each other in utter horror, their faces draining of all color. The air crackled with a delicious, karmic silence. And you, Alex continued, his voice still level but now carrying the unmistakable weight of authority, have spent the last hour harassing a guest in my establishment. A guest I personally invited here. A guest I hold in the highest possible regard. He then turned his gaze back to me, and it softened instantly. Clara, I haven't even had the chance to tell you what a huge fan I am. Or rather, we are. He looked down at Lily, who was now beaming. Lily has every single one of your books. We read Barnaby and the Grumpy Wombat so many times the cover fell off. My own surprise must have been evident on my face. You know who I am? Of course, he said. Clara Vance. You're a genius. The way you write about empathy and friendship. It's taught my daughter more than I ever could. The blood rushed back into Veronica's face, a splotchy, horrified red. She recognized my name. Her own children probably had my books on their shelves. The woman she had dismissed as a frumpy librarian, a charity case, was the celebrated author whose work was a staple in the very privileged homes she was so proud of. The irony was so thick you could taste it. No, Alex said, turning his attention back to the three women, his voice dropping to a low, decisive tone. I believe you were just leaving. He snapped his fingers, and the waiter who had been so kind to me earlier appeared instantly at his side. Marco, please bring these ladies their check. In fact, don't. Their dinner tonight is on the house. Consider it a parting gift. Your reservation privileges at all Sterling establishments are hereby permanently revoked. I will not have my guests, or my staff, subjected to such vile, judgmental behavior. Veronica looked like she'd been slapped. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. There was nothing to say. She and her friends gathered their expensive purses in a flustered, clumsy heap, their earlier grace completely gone. They couldn't get out of there fast enough, a cloud of shame and expensive perfume in their wake. As they scurried past our table, Veronica wouldn't meet my eyes. The entire restaurant, which had been pretending not to watch, now seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. A few patrons even offered small, approving smiles in our direction. The tension was gone, replaced by something warm and bright. Alex pulled out a chair for Lily and then sat down opposite me. Again, he said, his eyes full of sincere regret. I am so sorry. That you had to endure that I was the cause of it by being so late. Don't be. I interrupted, a real, genuine smile finally reaching my face. You and Lily had the most perfect timing I could have ever imagined. He smiled back, and in that moment, I felt a connection that 1,000 punctual dates couldn't have forged. Lily, meanwhile, had placed her Barnaby the bear on the table, propping him up against the breadbasket. Barnaby wants to know if he can have a Shirley Temple, she announced. We both laughed, a real, easy sound that filled the space their bitterness had left behind. The rest of the evening felt like a dream. Alex was everything Sarah had promised: kind, funny, and intelligent. He spoke about his daughter with a love that was palpable, and he asked me about my work with a genuine interest that was both flattering and rare. We talked about stories, about creativity, and about the simple, profound lessons hidden in tales for children. He told me he'd started the restaurant chain after his wife passed away, wanting to build something lasting for Lily, a place where families could make happy memories. I told him how I'd started drawing Barnaby the bear on napkins in a coffee shop, never dreaming he would one day live in the imaginations of children all over the world. We discovered that we both believed in the same things: that kindness is a strength, not a weakness, and that a person's worth has nothing to do with the clothes they wear or the money in their bank account. It has to do with the contents of their heart. As we left the restaurant hours later, Lily holding my hand on one side and Alex's on the other, I felt a profound sense of peace. The humiliation I'd felt earlier seemed like a distant memory, a shadow that had been chased away by the light of an unexpected connection. Those women had tried to make me feel worthless, but they had failed. In the end, they only revealed their own emptiness. Their world was built on a fragile foundation of judgment and materialism, a house of cards that a single moment of truth could topple. My world, the one I had built for myself, was founded on creativity, imagination, and the simple joy of telling a story. It was a foundation of rock. So if you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been made to feel small, remember my story. Don't let the Veronicas of the world define your worth. Hold your head high, be true to who you are, and trust that your own story is far more powerful than their fleeting, shallow judgment. The best people will see you for who you truly are, even if they're a little late to the table. If this story resonated with you, smash that like button and let me know in the comments what you would have done in that situation. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that prove kindness and character always win in the end.